In this episode, the hunter becomes the hunted. A bear hunt takes an unexpected turn when Richard Wesley startles a black bear in its territory. Caught on camera, it's only when Richard replays the footage for his family and friends that he realizes just how lucky he was. The same can't be said for the bear. Hit like and subscribe. This is Fierce. Richard Wesley was a hunter. He had been taught by his father, a successful hunter and trapper in Canada's Ontario region. It was a sport he regularly pursued, and the ultimate hunt was for black bear, using just his bow and arrow. He was skilled and enjoyed the thrill of the hunt, tracking the animal from afar before silently moving in, inching his way closer to make that perfect clean shot. He had never really thought much about the dangers of hunting, about the dangers of being out in the wilderness, actively hunting a dangerous predator. That was down to his father. He had been taught not to be afraid of anything, to stand up, to be a man. But sometimes fear is a good thing. Sometimes fear is what keeps you alive. It was spring 2019 in northern Ontario. Richard was out on the hunt. He had secured a hunting cabin and set out each day to track down a black bear. Ontario has one of the largest populations of black bears in North America, estimated to be between 75,000 and 100,000 individuals. It's a popular province to go hunting in. The majority of hunters set out to take down black bears with high-powered rifles, but shotguns loaded with slugs are also effective over short ranges. What is growing in popularity is bow hunting black bears. There are certain conditions and criteria that bows and bolts must adhere to ensure a clean and deadly shot. This was Richard's weapon of choice. It was silent, it was deadly. There was something more primal about hunting with a bow rather than a gun, a more traditional method of hunting that arguably requires greater skill at a closer range. When Richard left his hunting cabin one morning, he had no idea how his day was going to turn out. He had no idea that he could be walking his final steps. It could be the last time he fired his bow. He set off over ground on foot. He walked through the pine forests, pausing every so often to listen to his surroundings. He was heading to an area he felt sure would have some bears in it. He came to a clearing and an open off-road track. The trees had been felled there. Rotting trunks and branches lay strewn on the ground. The sky was overcast with gray clouds hanging down low. It was a bleak landscape. A cold, damp drizzle filled the air, wetting Richard's face as he scanned the open clearing. He knew there was a bear in the area. He had been tracking it for some time now, and then, as he walked along the track, he spotted something black in the distance. The telltale round figure of a large black bear. Richard had finally caught up with it. He was recording the hunt on his GoPro camera. In the footage, you can see the bear, a beautiful specimen. It was foraging for berries in the open landscape. Its head was down, low to the ground as it sniffed and rooted around. Richard quickly scuttled off the track and crouched down beside some felled tree trunks. He watched in anticipation. His heart thundered in his chest. He was in a vulnerable position. He had very little cover, and if he didn't make a clean shot, then he could enrage the bear, turning it into a lethal killing machine. He watched as the bear ambled along, seemingly unaware of the potential danger it was now in. It walked up the little bank and onto the track, making its way toward Richard. He held his nerve, waiting for the animal to come closer still. He loaded his arrow into his bow, ready to draw the string back at any moment. He steadied his nerves. The spring breeze picked up. He would have to account for the crosswind when he was ready to take his shot. The bear still had its head down, minding its own business, when it looked up. It stood less than 20 feet from Richard when it noticed him. Richard knew this was bad news. He knew the bear had been startled. In an instant, it galloped towards him. He could see its enormous feet pounding on the ground as it covered the distance in no time. He shouted at it, trying to scare it away, but it was now in full-out charge, its huge frame lumbering towards him. He raised his bow, but it was too late. Instead, he retreated, tripping and slipping over the tree trunks and branches as he did so. The enormous bear leapt over the fallen trees in just one leap and was now face to face with Richard. Then it jumped at him. In that split second, when it lunged up and onto Richard, he could see its claws. He could see its teeth. The power of the animal sent Richard crashing to the ground. He had his arrow still in his hand, his only form of defense. He remembered his father telling him that a bear is most sensitive on its nose, so he jabbed it with his arrow. He couldn't get a full swing at the bear because he was pinned to the ground, but he managed to stab it a few times on the snout. As he did so, the bear jumped off of him. He lay there waiting for the attack to continue, holding his breath. But it never came. Mercifully, the bear left Richard and ran off. He lifted his head to see where it had gone. He watched as he saw its lumbering body heading for the tree line, running away from him. The hunter had been incredibly lucky. If the bear had engaged in a full attack, then he would have been lucky to survive. Instead, Richard picked himself up and walked back to the cabin. He had come out of it unscathed. With the exception of a couple of bruises, Richard was completely unharmed. The adrenaline coursed through his body. He felt alive. A tussle with one of Canada's top predators had ended well for him. When he showed his family the video footage, he realized just how lucky he had been. His wife burst into tears, and his father had a worried look on his face. He was almost in shock. Richard had acted nonchalantly about the whole ordeal. He had described the attack to his family casually. But when he replayed the footage and when he saw the reaction of his family, only then did it hit him just how lucky he had been. He now had a new appreciation for life. He hugged those closest to him a little longer now. He no longer took things for granted. But that wasn't the end of it, at least not for Richard. Perhaps the bear should have finished the job. If it had, then it would still be alive today. Richard decided to seek revenge on the bear. Although the bear was merely doing what all bears do and defending its territory and acting out of surprise at having stumbled across the hunter, Richard decided to go back to the same spot and finish what he had initially set out to do. He was still a little shaken by the incident and this time decided to shoot from a tree stand. He recognized the bear from a white scar above its eye. When it came within striking distance, Richard raised his bow and fired the shot. His bear was harvested. Richard's job was done.